Hello, and welcome to Esoterica and Nonsense, a podcast where we discuss myths, legends, folktales, fairy tales, supernatural phenomenon, and religions from around the world. I am your host, Annabelle, and this is your reminder that here in the Esoterica and Nonsense world, everyone is welcome, everyone is loved, regardless of your nationality, religion, skin color, identity, sexuality, sexual identity, literally anything. But we are against genocide, human exploitation, human enslavement, capitalism at the expense of hurting planet Earth and any of her children. And more than anything, we support symbiosis, teamwork, and love for planet Earth. Because planet Earth is our shared mother. And I think that needs to be said, and I will keep saying it. I'm just very disappointed. I received my first hateful comment from a person who supports genocide. And I just wanted it to be very, very clear for anyone listening that I do not judge any person based on any kind of factors that the world groups them in. I don't really care what religion someone is. I don't care what nationality they are. I don't really care about all of these things. However, I respect humanity and I respect planet Earth, and there is nothing you can say to convince me that genocide is okay. Genocide is not okay. Okay? Great. I'm so glad that we cleared that up. Wow. I hope you're drinking water. If you haven't been drinking enough water today, this is your sign. And you know what? Another quick reminder, this realm is a dream. It's not even real. It is a shared dream that has lasted for thousands and thousands of years. And we share it, and some of us pop out and pop in, some of us stay for long periods of time, but this is a shared holographic tapestry. And I fear that we have all started to take it too seriously. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, I think we've let the rules of this dimension kill our optimism and our spirit because we have so many opportunities here and we are free. We are free. And I think if we all used our hearts more and our intuitions more, it would be a lot easier for us to navigate fascism because we do not have to comply. Anyway, it's getting political. Let's talk about myths, legends, deities, magic. Today, we are talking about rice and grain, the deities of rice and grain, the legacy of rice and grain, how it shaped and built humanity, not only literally, but also in the beliefs, the state of mind, and how we shaped our reality based on the reality of rice and grain, aka grasses. Now, I do want to share a theory really quickly, and then I do want to shout out Cheyenne, my my boo-boo, my lover boy. This is an idea that we had once, and it's I just want to plant the seed in your mind. I'm gonna light some Palo Santo while I talk. I want to plant the seed in your mind because I do think this is an interesting idea that you can think of as I'm talking about the information in this episode. So perhaps you've heard theories or concepts of people kind of talking about plants being the most sentient beings on planet Earth and that all other life exists to help plants grow. This is like a theory, right? Okay. So like the idea being like bees exists to pollinate flowers. And we, as humans, basically exist to terraform, to eat those plants and spread their seeds, to garden those plants, to poop, to fertilize them. And then by pooping, we're also spreading the seed, right? Okay, so bear with me with this idea and this concept of you are what you eat. I was thinking about this idea that, according to a lot of historians, a civilization, by definition, a civilization is a community that stays in one place and has a surplus and is able to provide. Essentially, aggregate agricultural communities are what historians decide are the basis of civilization. Do I agree? That's a different story. But what were the first agricultural surpluses? Grains, wheat, rice, corn. These are all grasses. Okay, so with this idea with you are what you eat, what if part of this idea of colonization is actually an overconsumption of grasses and grains? So the idea being, if you were having a balanced diet, you may not be led so far left towards grass. But because so much of our modern diet is only grain, only grasses, only corn and sugar derived food, sugar is also a grass. What if we're mimicking grass behavior by eating only grass? What if we are obsessed with homogeny? We're obsessed with cutting down forests to plant more grass, cutting down flowers to plant lawns in our front yard. What if colonization was a result of hundreds, if not thousands of years of eating too many grains and grasses? Okay, is that crazy? Is that fringe? We're just let that sink in and we're going to talk about it because you're going to be surprised. There is so much grain and grass culture woven into the fabric of human society. I don't think you even realize it. So let's get into it, babe. From the first stalks of barley along the Fertile Crescent to the shimmering rice paddies of Asia to the golden maize of the Americas, grains have been humanity's staff of life, but they have also been our sacred offerings, food for the body and food for the gods. How did rice and grains shape civilization? And why did nearly every culture deify them and weave them into ritual, into myth, and into cosmic symbolism? Dun, 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 dun. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm really excited about this one, baby. Okay, let's get into it. So, like I mentioned earlier, modern historians deem the birth of civilization to be around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. Now, if you ask me, who is just an amateur researcher. I'm just a guy who researches shit online and reports back to you, okay? But in my opinion, human civilization is much older. And if you disagree, or if write an email in. Actually, wait, pause. One more thing. I want to say that if quite a few people have been reaching out to me through my email, through Instagram, and through the comment section in various platforms. And I want to thank all of you. I don't think I I don't know if you realize that I'm really just a random guy who's researching things online that I'm passionate about, and of course using my critical thinking to try to piece the pieces together that all of these horrific colonizers have erased through history. But it means so much when you guys reach out to me. It means so much when you tell me that you appreciate the podcast. This has been a passion project of mine, and I have really made this for the fun of it. And it really means so much to me when you reach out. And so I really want to thank all of you and thank all of you who are just listening. It's okay if you don't write in or you send me a message. That's okay too. I just appreciate so much that you're listening. And I truly, truly thank you from the bottom of my heart. Okay, so let's dive back in, baby boy. Modern historians deem the birth of civilization to be around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. They call this the Neolithic Revolution. And what really deems this the quote, birth of civilization, is the domestication of grain. Okay? Humans domesticated, they bred for the qualities they liked, and they planted huge plots of things that they could eat for months at a time, grain. In this case, in the Fertile Crescent, a lot of barley was like the big cash crop. Okay. Not only was barley one of the biggest things in the Fertile Crescent, which we now call Mesopotamia, they also were planting wheat and a plant known as emmer. These were the basis of their civilization, which allowed their population to grow. Also, in China, the earliest rice domestication known to historians happened along the Yangtze River at around 9,000 BCE. So this, again, this is 11,000 years ago that in ancient China, they're domesticating rice, okay? Then in Mesoamerica, they were domesticating corn or maize, masa, and they domesticated it allegedly around 7,000 BCE. Now, I do want to say that this is alleged. I don't, I'm not trying to claim I'm some kind of conspiracy theorist. I just do think that a lot of historians are working with some outdated practices. So I would argue that perhaps some of these numbers are not accurate and that domestication of grains and plants happened much long ago, much, much further in the past. But let's just work with these numbers for now because by the modern standards, this is generally agreed upon. Great. Another, of course, massive continent of the earth is Africa, and they were domesticating mostly millet and another grain known as sorghum. These are not as popular in the West, obviously, but millet is an incredible grain, and I feel like does not get enough attention. We love millet bread, and we love millet muffins. And sorghum, actually, hold on, I looked it up and I forgot. I need to look it up again because I want to give you I want to give you the correct facts, people. Well, we try to give you the best facts. I try to give you the hottest facts on the market. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay. Sorghum is a versatile gluten-free cereal grain from the grass family. We knew that, you guys. Grain is from the grass family. We all knew that, right? Okay. Um, ooh, so it kind of looks like it has a long stalk, and then at the top there's these like reddish orange little beads, little bead things. You should look it up. Sorghum. 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 And it's known for its ability to grow in warm climates, especially dry climates, and it can tolerate lower nitrogen requirements, which is very special. Nitrogen, if you don't know, is what plants want. Nitrogen is all plants want. Plants need nitrogen. Nitrogen is everything. NPK, baby. Most desertous or like super hot areas don't have a lot of nitrogen because nitrogen is often created from, you guessed it, decomposing plants. So, for example, in the jungle, there is a plethora of nitrogen, especially in the topsoil, because there's always dead plants, there's always leaves falling, and that's really where you get that rich nitrogen. Or if there was plants in the ancient past, it's stored up through that soil. But if there's not a lot of plants in that soil, and then as time goes on, there's less plants and there's not really a lot of nitrogen to work with. So if you find a plant that doesn't need a lot of nitrogen, you have hit the jackpot. This is a huge deal. And of course, a lot of areas of Africa are incredibly hot. And so this would be an incredible grain to work with. Also, it is used for dyeing textiles and it's used for dyeing leather. And it can also be used for making ethanol and syrup. Okay. So anyway, oh, and sorry, one more thing. It can also be used to produce hay. And that is an honorable mention that I do think is worth noting. Grasses and grains feed your livestock, which are another resource for civilization. Okay, so that being said, we have a picture of the ancient world. The ancient world is fueled by grasses, specifically grain. This is the crop that is feeding the people, that is feeding the goats, that is feeding the piggies, and feeding the other, animals that are living around. Okay. So we have the grain cultivation. The grain cultivation leads to a stable food supply. Stable food supplies lead to villages, which leads to cities, which leads to states, right? This is a huge leap here. We go from like you and your homies to a whole village, to a whole city, to a whole state, like basically a country, okay? And with storage of grain, being able to store large amounts of grain, you now have a complex social system. You are able to start taxing people, to start public services, such as temples, such as charity, and such as hierarchies. The ritual control of grain surplus equals power. And this could be power of state, but also religious/spiritual power. Now, again, pause. I want to go back to my theory. This idea of like grass as a colonizer. Grass often creeps and is invasive. It wants other plants to die so that grass can spread. And I'm just saying the fact that grain is considered the the basis of what grows a civilization, but it also is the basis of growing hierarchies. I don't know. I'm just saying. You know what I mean? Yes, you do. Okay. So, with this idea of grain creating hierarchies, creating a person of power, because this person has a surplus, this person has more grain than you do. This also kind of creates a spiritual connection to the grain. Grain became a medium of ceremony. It became a medium of creating magical moments together because this grain was the basis of life. And now I really want to blow your mind because as grain is the seed of civilization, words are seeds as well, and they carry history with them. When we speak of ceremonies, we rarely think of things like barley or wheat in the modern day, obviously. Yet, the word ceremony comes from the word Ceres, who was the goddess of grain. She is the goddess who gave Rome bread. The word celebrate literally means to honor the goddess Ceres, the goddess of grain. A ceremony was quite literally the rites of Ceres. Even today, every ritual that we call a ceremony carries the echo of an ancient harvest festival. Just think about that. Our words are spells. And without realizing it, so many words in our day-to-day vocabularies come from ancient culture and ancient ritual. And the word ceremony and celebrate refer back to grain, refer back to celebrating the goddess of grain herself. Think about that. That's crazy. Let that sink in, babe. Let's take a break. Planet Earth can be a terrifying place sometimes. Why is that? Because of humanity, human beings. However, I would like to remind you that planet Earth is a beautiful planet, and a big reason why is because of plants. Plants are amazing. Plants are so magical. Plants are the original OG life force on this planet. Plants can heal us, and plants necessitate our health. This is your reminder. Maybe you should plant a plant this year. If you're worried about plants, maybe you can have a succulent like an agave. Agaves are amazing because it's almost impossible to kill agaves. And you can use them on your skin. You can use them if you have a sunburn. You can use them for moisturization. You can actually drink the pulp if you ever have a cold. Plants are incredible. The list goes on. You already know. But research some plants. Plant a house? No. Plant a plant within your house. Maybe plant a tree outside of your house. If everyone on earth planted a tree today, that would be almost 8 billion more trees. Let's do this as a team, baby. So, as we were saying, my love, ceremony, celebration, derivatives of Ceres, the goddess of grain herself. But what about the word cereal? Yes, you are so right. Cereal also comes from the goddess of Ceres. Though we've forgotten the goddess herself and rarely mention her, we still begin our day with cereal. I mean, not all of us, but many of us do, or even with just a piece of toast, some bread. Cereals refers to all things derived from grain. Well, however, it gets deeper. The word companion is someone you share bread with, literally. The pieces of the word com, which means with, and panis, which means bread. So literally, companion is bread with, someone you share bread with. And then the word company is a group who eats bread together. Companis, bread with. Get out of town. You're kidding. In other words, our very definition of friendship and fellowship is rooted in the sharing of grain. What? This is crazy. Even power itself is bound to cereals and grains and, I mean, really, grass. I'm telling you, I'm proving my point. Your mind's blown right now. The word Lord, okay, Lord Farquaad, yes. The word Lord comes from the Old English word Hlaford, which literally translates to loaf guardian. Shut up, loaf guardian. The lady, the word lady, comes from the Old English word helfidke. Okay, wait, let's try this again. Helfage. That's a hard one. Helfage. Um, please, if you know how to pronounce that, email in. This word literally translates to the one who kneads the bread, the one who bakes the bread. And I just like, I also just want to pause here and like really talk about gender roles. And I think this is so interesting. I think like through the last thousands of years, obviously through colonization and hatred and bigotry, a lot of things have been erased through history. And I think a great example would be the roles of women and just the respect of women. And nowadays, I think when we hear this, it's easy to spin this idea of like the man is the leader because he's guarding the bread and the woman bakes it as she's a servant. However, if you really think about it, like who is more powerful? The bodyguard or the creator? The woman is creating the bread, therefore creating society. And the man is the guardian, the bodyguard. And it's not really about who's better or what. I'm just want to point out how our modern minds are trained to minimize the role of a woman in society and the role of the femininity in society. And I do think that this is really critical to think about, that the word lady actually derives from the one who makes the bread. which is the basis of all society. Okay, let's, with that, let's carry on. Which, with these words, lord and lady, of course, big words in the English language, especially in the British hierarchies. To be noble is not just to rule, it's not just to be in control of other people, but it's to provide food. It is to make and protect food surpluses. That is where those words come from. Pivotal. Leadership meant feeding people. Mm. And that's like another whole tangent. I feel like I could talk about this for hours, but I do also think that through colonization, we have perverted what king and queen or lord and lady are supposed to be. And in my humble opinion, in the ancient world, I mean, I think who comes to mind is King Solomon, right? The idea that the king or the queen was the father and mother of a nation. Their decisions were to benefit the people. They guarded the surplus because they were the most responsible. And so to be king or queen is the hardest job in the land. To make decisions that benefit everyone, that's almost impossible, right? Everyone can never truly benefit. Usually someone has to get hurt. And so the idea is like, who is qualified to do that? Usually the wisest and most knowledgeable woman in the land would be appointed to that role. But of course, as time went on and through tyranny and usurping thrones and greed, the king and the queen just became people who were rich. They just wanted to hoard the surplus for themselves. And of course, now that's what most people want. Most people really just want wealth for the sake of wealth, or they want to be king for the crown. But I don't think people think about what king used to really mean. The guardian of the surplus, the guardian of the food. Not the keeper of the food, not the owner of the food, the guardian. Hmm. Hmm. We're getting deep today, baby. Another interesting tidbit is time. Our concept of time and our calendars is deeply tied in to grain itself. Time was measured in grain. The word calendar comes from the Latin word calende, and this would be the day that debts and taxes were paid. And these debts and taxes were paid in grain, not in money. And fun fact, this was also usually on the full moon. So oftentimes on the full moon, that's when you had to go and harvest your grain to pay your taxes. And so even this word calendar that we use, we say the word calendar all the fucking time. It comes from the word calendar. It all goes back to grain. Just get out of town. Another interesting point, too, is that each month in the ancient world was marked by agricultural cycles, sowing season, harvesting season, and eventually to store. Time itself was a farmer's calendar, a grower's calendar. Another interesting thing too is that in some Asian cultures, specifically Japanese culture, timing of the day is related to grain. And there are words about like morning rice or afternoon rice or evening rice. And these are times of day that rice is used as the time teller. Like think about how pivotal this is. Our whole human society is built on grain. And I just really think that we've kind of forgotten this. I think also in the quote modern world, a lot of us are separated from agriculture. A lot of us haven't really seen these systems in place. We haven't really seen huge monoculture farms growing these crops. We haven't really seen these things in actions and seen how our societies are built through grains or even necessarily think about that grain being a part of our culture, right? Um, like a great example, I'll never forget once I was in an Uber. It was like a ride share situation, and I was like chatting with some rando, and we were talking about plants. And I, at this point in my life, I was deep in the plant world. I was like growing weed for a long time when it was illegal because I was a bad boy. And then eventually, when I got out of the weed world, I worked on a cacao farm for a short while. And then eventually, I ended up working on an agroforestry project in Brazil. And I was actually still working in the weed world. Anyway, I was talking about plants and I was talking about how little we know about plants because when you live in a city or when you live in a metropolis, you're so far removed. And I was talking about all these fruits that I had tried. I was talking about fruits that I had never heard of. I was talking about cacao, and like a lot of us don't even really know what cacao looks like when it grows, and that cacao has a fruit that is like tangy. And I was like telling him about this. And then I just threw out like, yeah, like think about cashews. Like, do you know what cashews look like when they grow on a tree? And he was like, no. And I realized I didn't either. So I looked it up. Cashews grow in these huge fruits, and the skin is highly poisonous. The skin is so poisonous that like 30% of the people on the planet have a death-ray reaction to like the chemicals that the oils on the outer part of the cashew skin. And each of these huge fruits, it's like the size of a grapefruit. It has one nut. It has one cashew nut on the bottom of that fruit. Isn't that crazy? None of us even think about that, right? Anyway, here I am just going off the rails. The point I'm getting at is that we forget that our whole human society, regardless of where you're from, is built on grain. And not only society, but our sacred rites. Grain lingers in all sacred and ceremonial rites. Specifically, let's talk more etymology. The word host, um, specifically in this context, the host of the Eucharist, right? The holy bread, comes from the Latin word hostia, which means sacrifice. Get out of town. So when Christians take communion, when they have that sip of wine and that little like weird, creepy wafer, they are reenacting an agricultural mystery as old as Osiris sprouting barley from his body, or the Mexica maize god dying to feed the people. So, like, and that I think is important to sink in. Of course, this idea of having the body of Christ, the bread associated with the body of Christ, people associate it with being a Christian concept. But we all know, if you haven't listened, go check out my episode about Copts, episode 2. There's also the Christmas episode. We all know that the Vatican, aka the Roman Catholic Church, rebranded a lot of ancient culture and called it Christianity. And a lot of it is an OG Christianity. A lot of it comes from all kinds of ancient practices and rituals. So I do think it's important to note that much before Christianity was practiced in Rome and much before Christianity existed, people were eating grains as a ceremonial ritual, as ingesting the body of their gods. That's deep. That is crazy. So, what do all these words really tell us? Grain is not just a food. Grain is not just a plant. It is a measure of time. It is the symbol of power, the bond of friendship, the heart of a ritual, and the very body of the divine. Our languages still carry that memory quietly in every word we use. Every time you say the word companion or ceremony or calendar, you are speaking the names of ancient harvests. Our tongues and languages still remember the legacy of the ancient world, even if we have cognitively forgotten. I could cry. I could literally cry. This is why I do this. I feel like I'm a detective. It just pisses me off. Like, why didn't they teach us this in school? Do you know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of stuff as a kid I would have died to learn. I would have died to learn this stuff in school, you guys. Come on. Ugh, it just drives me crazy. So, before we move on to get into some really cool, beautiful deities, I also do want to mention a couple honorable mentions outside of the English language. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the ancient Chinese language. Of course, nowadays there are different dialects, and there is Cantonese and Mandarin, and I'm not an expert on this stuff. I can't say that enough. um, but in the ancient Chinese language, and I think in modern Chinese languages, the word for rice and meal are identical. So essentially, the word for food, meal, is rice. Interesting. Also, of course, rice is not even just a food concept. The symbol of rice is embedded into the writing system of the Chinese characters, right? As we all know, the Chinese language and the Japanese language have a different writing system that is not phonetic. They use characters, which in a sense are more symbolic. And interestingly, the symbol of rice, it's almost kind of like a quotation mark. They're these like two little lines. And those two little lines are incorporated in hundreds of food related words, foods that don't even contain rice. Rice is still often used in those characters, which I find very interesting. And like I mentioned earlier, in Japan, rice is often associated with the rhythm of the day. There's morning rice, day rice, evening rice. Also, I think it's worth noting that even the word rice comes from Asia. Rice traces back its etymological roots. Is that a word? Etymological? The etymology of rice comes from India, obviously the Sanskrit language, and it comes from the word virhi, vrihi, vrihi. I hope I'm saying that right. Who knows? Vrihi. And this is one of the oldest Indo-European words for rice, and it's found in Vedic texts. And of course, through trading and through trading routes, this word vrihi traveled into the West. It went from vrihi into Greek orisa and into Latin orisa and eventually into Spanish arroz and into Italian riso and into English rice. How about that, baby boy? How about that? Pretty crazy. The very word rice in English is descended from Sanskrit. This really kind of shows you and reminds you how the crop and its name traveled along ancient trade routes from India into Europe, revolutionizing our minds and our worlds. You really are what you eat. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Now, I feel like that was a super long background. I just love the hot. I like the meat. I like knowing all the details. That's what I like bringing you. I like bringing you the details, and then I like getting into the myths. So that's what's coming up next. Let's take a quick break, and then I'm going to start telling you some folk tales, babe. Hello, traveler. Have you forgotten that you are an incredible, one-of-a-kind pepper? There's no one on planet Earth like you. Do you know how incredible that is? Never forget it. It might take time. It might take practice, but whatever your dreams are, you can attain them. Yes, you can, and you know that it's true. I believe in you. I'm so proud of you. One step at a time, and you're gonna make it. Boom. Let's get into it. Let's go crazy. Okay, we have so many things to cover. Some of them I'm going to give you deep, deep details, but I want to tell you about as many grain and rice deities as possible. So come with me now on a journey through time and space. So, first up in Mesopotamia, we have Ashnan. Ashnan is the goddess of grain. She is seen as the divine gift because grain is the divine gift. It is said that Ashnan, grain, and Lahar, cattle, were created by the gods to feed humanity. Temples in ancient Mesopotamia stored grain as offerings and redistribution centers. And think about that. Temples were storing grain and redistributing grain. That is pivotal. That is pivotal. So I'm going to tell you a brief um, little tidbit about her myth because it's so beautiful. So, according to the myth, at first, the gods themselves labored. They would dig canals and they would gather food. But they grew weary, they grew tired. And eventually, Enlil and Enki created humans to work in the fields. Yeah. I feel like we end up talking about the Anunnaki in every episode. But Enlil and Enki are brothers, the sons of Anu, according to the Mesopotamian history. Anu being the creator god of the Anunnaki, Enlil being his legitimate son, quote unquote, and Enlil being his son with his concubine. He gave them Earth as a project, and according to the Mesopotamian history, and according to a lot of conspiracy theorists, humans were created as workers for the Anunnaki, and it's being it's being confirmed here in the research we've done on Mesopotamian history. Okay. Enlil and Enki create humans to work in the fields. Ashnan, grain, and Lahar, the cattle, argued which of their gifts were more essential. Ultimately, the gods declared that Ashnan was the greater gift, for bread and beer were the divine sustenance of both gods and men. Because of this, ancient Mesopotamians would give grain offerings accompanied with temple rituals. They often stored grain in their ziggurats and temples, and they would make beer from barley and they would drink this communally in sacred feasts. This myth really encodes Mesopotamian reality. Grain storage and irrigation were the basis of the temple economy and priestly power. The goddess Ashnan represents the gift from foraging to settled farming, where bread became civilization itself and is protected and distributed by the priests themselves. Pretty interesting. Then, of course, we have Egypt. In Egypt, we have the god Osiris. Another fun episode I highly recommend listening to is the Isis episode, Isis and the Golden Pepper, I believe it's called. We hear all about Osiris's golden pepper. And by pepper, I mean the pepper in his pants. But in Egyptian culture, Osiris is linked to barley and wheat. Many myths describe his body sprouting grain, symbolizing resurrection. Many festivals involved planting Osiris beds. These would be plant beds of sprouting barley to honor life after death. Bread and beer, which of course is grain, babe, were staple offerings in the tombs. A little brief summary of the Osiris myth. Osiris, beloved king of Egypt, was betrayed by his jealous brother Set. Trapped inside a coffin, Osiris was slain and his body scattered across the land. Grief-stricken, his wife Isis searched the earth, gathering fragments of her husband. Yeah, I'm telling you, you need to listen to the full episode. Shout out to my good friend Bisaraha, who tells us the story. I mean, this is the brief overview, but I'm telling you, it's hot gossip. It's basically a soap opera. Eventually, when Isis laid Osiris to rest, something miraculous happened. From the place where Osiris's body touched the earth, barley and wheat sprang forth, green and golden. His very body became the seed, and his death became the source of new life. Egyptians saw the sprouting grain as an eternal cycle, death in the soil, rebirth in each harvest. During annual festivals, they created these Osiris beds, right? This is a reenactment of this death and resurrection. How beautiful is that? I love it. Osiris himself is the personification of death and rebirth, the Nile flooding, bringing the fertility and then drying up again. He embodies the agricultural heartbeat of the Egyptian civilization. His myth is ritualized in truth that without death, no seed can be sown, and without burial, no life can grow. And this is true. I mean, this kind of brings me back to my nitrogen rant, but all of the nutrients in the soil comes from dead things that lived before it, dead plants, dead animals. All the nutrients in the soil comes from recycled life. And that's true for all of us. I love this sentiment that like the water in your body has existed on earth for millions of years. And millions of years ago, the water in your body could have been trapped inside of an opal. Parts of the water in your body could have lived within a dinosaur. It could have been at the bottom of the ocean, as well as all the other particles in your body, all the carbon, all the nitrogen, all the oxygen. It's all existed in other forms. And some of it is with us for many years, and some of it's with us for a few days, depending on what it is. You know, the water in our body is coming and going. Think about that. That's crazy. It's pretty wild. Anyway, now this brings us to our honorable mention, Demeter. Demeter, as we know, is the mother of Persephone. I also have a full episode talking about Persephone and Inanna and the similarities in their stories. Demeter is the goddess of grain, agriculture, and fertility. And during these sacred rituals, which are now known as the Eleusinian mysteries, these are called mysteries because people don't exactly know what was happening there. I think, in my opinion, it really seems like the Christian church destroyed a lot of evidence or writings about these rituals. But essentially, there would be ceremonies that were mostly women, and they would drink a a barley based alcohol known as kykeon. And this barley beer essentially was supposed to symbolize rebirth. And then, of course, her daughter Persephone is the symbol that is tied to the cycle of the seasons and the cycle of regrowth, the cycle of death and life again. It's very similar to Osiris. I it just gets me. It just gets me, you guys. It just gets me that in school we weren't talking about this. I also just feel like my other gripe with school is how things are really like they pick and choose, and I feel like they like miss an anthropological moment, because I do think an interesting and a crucial part about studying history is studying the whole world at the same time, right? And that's basically what I'm trying to do. I am choosing an episode, right? This episode is about grain and rice. I'm really trying to illustrate the whole world's relationship to that. Of course, I can't give you every detail. Of course, I'm an amateur, but I feel like this is what's missing in school. Like, I really want more context. Even if we're just going to learn about the kings and the wars without context, without what was happening in other parts of the world, without the opinions of that king's father, without hundreds of years leading up to that moment and leading up to that war, leading up to that inquisition, we lose so much information about the nuance of said situation. Anyway, oh my God. Oh, we're on rants. I'm fucking fired up. I'm fired up. Okay. Next up, we have Demeter, our Grecian goddess. Nope, we just talked about her. Next up, we're going to tap back into Rome. Oh, I know my white guys in the audience, my cisgendered white guys are thrilled. We're going to talk about Rome. Obviously, earlier we already did talk about the goddess series a little bit, but we're also just going to kind of get deep into some more words and some more things about grain and really how much that shaped our modern world. So, I mentioned earlier that the word calendar derives from the word cereal, but also just economy in general and spiritual life, especially in our modern day, comes from a lot of Roman ideas and relationship with the cultivation of grain. So each month in ancient Rome had festivals marking the season that they were in. So, for example, around April 25th, they would celebrate what was called Robigalia, and this was a sacrifice to protect grain from disease. In the beginning of April, they would uh, celebrate Cerealia, the festival of Ceres, right? And even just that sentence, celebrate Cerealia, these like derivative, redundant. Then there was also a festival known as Consulalia. This happened in both August and December, and this would honor the Consus, which is the god of stored grain. So basically, every season has a festival about grain. Think about that. That is so, I mean, and that kind of what it makes sense that the word celebrate would derive from a word that means grain because every big holiday is about grain. That's massive. Also, of course, grain was used to pay taxes. A big reason why the Roman Empire would even conquer other areas was to gain more farmland to collect more grain. Specifically Sicily, Egypt, and North Africa, they would conquer these places to receive their grain taxes to feed the rest of their empire. Just let that sink in. Also, there was a system known as the annona system. This was a monthly grain dole distributed to the citizens of Rome, ensuring loyalty and stability. So this was like a redistribution situation, right? They're receiving the taxes from other parts of the empire and giving out wheat as a daily stipend to people in the Roman Empire. I'm just saying. The other thing, I think most of us know this, but there used to be 13 months. And even the names of our months derive from numbers. And for example, September means the seventh month. October means the eighth month. December means the 10th month. And a lot of these numbers actually comes from the number of harvest it is. Like what? Because they would be harvesting throughout the year. Isn't that interesting? I think that's fascinating. Okay, so now let's talk about India for a little bit, shall we? In India, we have a goddess known as Annapurna. Of course, I think a lot of us have heard of the Annapurna circuit. This is the most common hiking trail in Nepal that ends up leading you to base camp at Mount Everest. But Annapurna is the goddess of nourishment and often depicted holding a bowl of rice. And then, of course, Lakshmi. Lakshmi is the goddess of good fortune and fertility and prosperity. And she is often given grains of rice at her festivals. People will bring rice to give to her as a tribute. And like, are we surprised that they're doing this all over the world? No. If you know anything about humanity, we're all kind of same, but different. We are all kind of same, but different because we are all one collective consciousness. We are one, we are shreds from the same mirror. We are branches from the same tree. And you know I'm right. Deep down, you know that I'm right. So let's talk about Lakshmi for a little bit. One thing I would love to mention, one thing that I love about Hinduism is that many of the stories in the Hindu tradition are told orally. So I'm going to tell you a little story of Lakshmi, but I also want you to remember that this is one story that people have different versions, depending on what part of India their family is from and the kinds of stories that were passed down from their moms and from their moms and from their moms and from their moms. And I am just a random guy. I'm just an amateur doing my best to report facts. Okay. So, Lakshmi, goddess of fortune, prosperity, fertility, and abundance, is one of the most widely worshipped deities in the Hindu pantheon. While Lakshmi is often associated with gold and fortune, she is equally linked to rice and grain as the true foundation of prosperity. Ding, ding, ding. She's often depicted with 4 arms, seated on a lotus, flanked by elephants, pouring out rice or sometimes coins out from her palms. During Diwali, bowls of rice are offered to Lakshmi alongside lamps to invite prosperity into the household. I just think that is so nice. Another interesting thing, which also is done in the West, is rice being used at weddings. Often in India at weddings, rice is scattered or poured into the bride's hands, symbolizing Lakshmi's blessings for abundance and fertility in her new home. Which again ties back in to that wealth is not specifically tied to the idea of money or gold, but into food security, into a surplus of grain. Rice, dal, wheat sustains life. Lakshmi's blessing of rice equates spiritual grace with material nourishment. It's monumental. Monumental, baby. Next up, we have the beautiful and special Shenong. Shenong is a deity from China, and Shenong is known as the divine farmer. Shenong taught people to cultivate grain and medicinal plants, a gift to humanity. Shenong, the divine farmer, is considered one of the mythical 3 sovereigns from ancient China. He was a cultural hero credited with teaching humanity agriculture and herbal medicine. It is said that he was born with a transparent stomach so he could see the effects of plants inside of his body. He tasted hundreds of herbs each day, discovering which cured and which poisoned. He introduced the cultivation of the 5 grains: rice, millet, wheat, barley, and soybeans. According to some versions of the story, he died after tasting a poisonous herb that ruptured his body, and he sacrificed himself for human knowledge. To this day, farmers honor Shenong with offerings before planting their crops. Imperial ceremonies celebrated him as the first bringer of civilization via grain. Dude. Shenong is truly the archetype of agriculture as a divine gift. He links food and medicine. Showing how farming is not only about survival, but about human mastery over health, ritual, and cosmic order. Just get out of here. Are you serious? And that's like, I think that's the other aspect that we forget too. Food is medicine. And in our modern day, it has been separated and manufactured into pills and things that are derivative. But we forget that all medicine comes from plants. Surplus of plants and cultivation of plants is true wealth. And plants are medicine. Plants are food. With that, let's take a break. Hey, little pepper. This is Annabelle here, reporting live from Pepper World HQ. If you enjoy the podcast, it would help so much if you could follow me, you could write a comment, give me 5 stars perhaps. Also, I would love to hear from you. Email in at esotericanonnonsense@gmail.com. I'd love to hear about your stories. I'd love to hear about suggestions. I would love to hear about any kind of weird, freaky thing that comes to your mind. Also, if you would like to support my podcast, you can follow me on Patreon. It's Patreon.com/Esoterica and Nonsense. I will also have a YouTube page coming at you so soon. And I also sell merch. You can look up my merch. It's in the show notes for every single episode, as well as the show notes for my show. I appreciate you so much. I made this podcast to connect with cool, freaky people like you. So thank you so much. Ooh, I'm so excited. There's so many other deities that are so good. Now, let's talk about one of my absolute favorites. This is the goddess Dewi Sri, the Balinese slash Indonesian goddess of rice. And just do yourself a favor and Google her right now. Dewi, Dewi, Sri, Sri. Dewi Sri. She's gorgeous. Oh, we love her. So, according to Indonesian myth, Dewi Sri is the goddess of rice and fertility. Without her blessing, no rice can grow, and hunger descends upon the land. She is often depicted as a beautiful woman dressed in green and gold, holding bushels of rice. Oh, one tale tells how Dewi Sri was killed by jealous forces, but from her body, rice plants emerged, her gift to humanity. In a different version of the story, she descended from heaven and taught humans how to cultivate rice, showing them how to prepare their rice paddies, how to plant the seedlings, and harvest with care. I do think it's interesting, though, this overlap with Osiris, that a version of her story is that she was killed by a jealous force and then rice grew out of her body. That is fascinating. I love her. Okay, so now I have like a little longer form story. These are my favorite. I just like love story time. So, long ago, the gods looked down upon the world and saw that humans suffered. They had no food, no crops to sustain them, and hunger darkened their lives. So the gods sent down our beautiful Dewi Sri, the radiant goddess of fertility, beauty, and abundance. Some tales say she was born from the heavens, her body shining like the moon. Others tell that she was once slain by envious gods, and buried from her buried body sprang the first rice plants. Her hair became the golden stalks, her eyes the grains, her lifeblood the fertile waters that filled the paddies. In either telling, she gave herself so that humanity might live. From Dewi Sri rice came into the world, and with rice, life itself. She taught humans to till the fields, when to plant the seedlings, how to harvest with reverence. And so, in every village, farmers came to honor her. They built shrines in their rice barns. They offered flowers to her. They would light incense for her. And for the first grains of the harvest, they would whisper prayers of gratitude. To this day in Bali, the cultivation of rice is more than farming. It is a ritual. The Subak irrigation system, a cooperative water sharing practice, is organized around temples dedicated to Dewi Sri. Ah, our girl. Priests bless the canals, farmers chant prayers before planting, and after harvest, the rice is brought back to her shrines. During weddings, offerings of rice symbolize her blessing, ensuring fertility and abundance in the couple's new household. In some ceremonies, rice is scattered across the ground, not wasted but returned to the goddess, a reminder that what sustains us belongs first to her. Dewi Sri reveals how deeply rice is woven into Indonesian life, not just as food, but as currency, as culture, and as the fabric of reality itself. To Balinese farmers, rice is not just a crop to be exploited, but a divine gift to be cared for, a living embodiment of the goddess herself who sustains all living beings. Oh, it's so nice. Oh my God. I just love this. I love all these goddesses. They're so nice. It actually reminds me, I did talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk about her in a few minutes, but I did do an episode about Mbokomu, Chekome, Chekomekoitl, and Kaguya, who are all plant goddesses. Technically, Kaguya is not a grain goddess. She is a bamboo goddess, which does fall into the grass category. And Mbukombu, which is also a plant goddess from Africa. That's a beautiful episode, and I highly recommend you listening to it. And it just all these stories are kind of reminding me of these beautiful plant goddesses. I think they're my favorite. Okay. Next up, we have the beautiful, the iconic Japanese goddess Inari Okami. She is the goddess of rice, fertility, and foxes. Interesting. Thousands of Inari shrines are places where they still offer rice. Oh my God. Inari Okami is among the most beloved kami in Japanese tradition. A kami is a deity. Okay. Inari Okami is associated with rice, agriculture, fertility, prosperity, and even industry in later centuries. Another fun thing that we love about Inari is that Inari's gender shifts. Sometimes Inari is depicted as a bearded old man. Sometimes Inari is depicted as a beautiful woman. And sometimes as an old androgynous, non-binary baddie, which we're obsessed with. Dude, I'm obsessed with Inari Okami. That's hot. We love our non-binary babies. You are everything, literally, truly. Another interesting thing I find so cool is this association that Inari Okami has with foxes slash the kitsune. The kitsune is this devious fox spirit in Japanese culture. The fox is considered the sacred messenger of Inari. It is believed to carry keys to rice granaries in their mouths. Fox statues line Inari shrines, their mouths holding sheaves of rice, of jewels, and of secret scrolls. What? This is so sick. I'm obsessed with this. This reminds me of my best friend Nico. Nico is like a non-binary baddie who sees foxes in their dream world. I think my best friend might be an incarnation of Inari Okami. No big deal. I think I know this person. I'm pretty sure I know Inari in the flesh. Dude, the most famous shrine is known as the Fushimi Inari Taisha, which is a shrine in Kyoto with thousands of red torii gates, those beautiful, like red gateways. They lead into a sacred mountain path. Farmers once left offerings of rice and sake, and later merchants left offerings of coins, trying to bribe Inari to give them good harvests and a good fiscal year. During planting season, people would make these offerings. They would sometimes even leave fried tofu, and they would leave the fried tofu, which is known as aburage, was specifically given for the foxes, so they would bribe the foxes to get to Anari's heart. This was all currency, a tax given to their beloved deity. And Inari's shifting identity as both feminine and male mirrors the shifting role of rice, the shifting of the seasons, the substance of farming to national economy to modern prosperity. Uh, that is so incredible. Shintoism is so fucking cool. And this is why we love all indigenous cultures. And this is true for all indigenous cultures. I don't every single indigenous culture, European included, but we're talking Asia, Africa, the Americas, every indigenous culture had a different idea of what gender was. There was gender fluidity. There was this idea that gender was a concept that lived within all things. And we have forgotten that, people. Come on, let's get back to it. Let's get back to it. Oh, did you hear those neck cracks? Those were incredible. Okay, next up, we're moving to the Americas, specifically Mesoamerica. And we have the gorgeous goddess, Chicomacoitl. I did talk about her in one of my episodes, but we're just going to brush up on her again to remind you. Chicomacoitl is a Mexica goddess. If you're new here, we say Mexica on this podcast. A lot of modern Western historians refer to the Mexica as Aztec or Aztecas. Technically, this is a made-up word. It derives from the word Aztlan, which was the land of the Mexica people that eventually was created into its own world, Azteca, or in English, Aztec. I prefer using the word Mexica because the Mexica people did not call themselves Aztecs. So why would I? So, Chicomecoitl is a Mexica deity. Her name translates into seven serpent. She is the goddess of maize, of corn, and she is the goddess of fertility and sustenance. She is often depicted as a young woman carrying ears of maize, or she is depicted as an older woman with a serpent staff. Ooh, hot. She is both the nourishing mother, but also the feared bringer of famine if she is not respected and honored properly. She's worshipped at harvest festivals. People would bring offerings, which would include tamales, tortillas, and stalks of maize. In solemn rites, young women were sacrificed in her honor. Their death mirrored the death of maize to renew life. That is really interesting, actually. I'm not for human sacrifice per se, but I understand where they're going with this idea of like the goddess dies and then spring comes. I'm understanding the concept. Okay. So, another honorable mention in the Mesoamerican tradition is a deity known as Sentioto. He is known as the Lord of Maize. He is a male deity and sometimes considered the son of Xochiquetzal, the goddess of fertility and flowers. Sentioto, the Lord of Maize, represents maize at different stages of growth, specifically young maize, young corn that is ready for harvest. He's often depicted with a headdress of corn and a face that is painted yellow. They would often have festivals in his honor involving bloodletting rituals, dances, and offerings of pulque. Pulque is a fermented agave drink. It's kind of like an agave kombucha, if you will. And they would often eat maize dishes. Centioitl and Chicomecoitl are often associated with each other, and in some traditions, they are seen as paired deities, almost like twins. Another honorable mention is the god Hunhunapu. This is a Mayan god of maize. He is known as the classic god of maize and sometimes known as Yumil Kashob, which means Lord of Harvest. He is one of the central figures in the Popol Vuh, which is the Mayan creation myth. According to the Popol Vuh, humans were made from the dough of maize and ground from the sacred mountain of corn. In my episode, I think it's Cat Deities Part 2. I cover the story of the hero twins, Hunapu and Shibalenke. And they are actually the sons of Hunhunapu, who is the god of maize. Fun fact, this is their daddy. In that myth, I do talk about his death and rebirth, and his death and rebirth are a huge part of that story and the creation myth, eventually, of the sun and the moon. I do think it's so beautiful that all of these plant gods are associated with death and rebirth. Like, duh, it's gorgeous. Hunhunapu, the maize god, is often depicted with his head buried in the earth, sprouting corn, the symbol of life arising from death. He's depicted as youthful and a handsome figure. He represents fertility, life, and cosmic cycles. Ah, and now we have one of my favorites, the corn maidens and corn mothers of the Hopi tradition. Now, I've said this once and I'll say this again. Almost all of my information on the ancient world is tainted through modern colonization, and specifically Western European colonization, as I'm a native English speaker. So a lot of my sources have been written by white men through centuries who are frankly idiots. Sorry, not sorry. So, as I'm telling about, especially these Mesoamerican deities, I wish I had more information to give you. Part of why my information is brief is because I don't always trust a lot of my sources. And there's not a lot written about them because white people have destroyed so much of their culture and so much of their oral traditions. Okay, just throwing that out there. So, in the Hopi tradition in North America, there is corn goddesses and corn mothers. So instead of being one, it is like a whole collection, almost like a field of corn. In the Hopi language, they're often referred to as the Chocolo, which I am almost sure I'm pronouncing improperly. Chocolo, corn maidens, or the Mayingwa, which are the daughters of the corn. Oh, so beautiful. Daughters of the corn. Can we make, like, instead of children of the corn, can we make daughters of the corn? And it's all these like beautiful corn goddesses who are so nice. I want to see that movie. The corn goddesses are associated with sacred life force and a gift of the creator. Corn, or maize, is central to the Hopi ritual of life. They had 6 colors of corn that represented the 6 directions and clans. The stories would tell of the corn maidens who danced to bring fertility and abundance. When humans neglected them, they withdrew, causing famine. Cornmeal was used often in offerings, in blessings, and in ceremonies. Corn husks crafted into dolls would teach children about reverence for the crop. The corn mother embodies nourishment, fertility, and moral responsibility. People would learn to honor her and to honor corn with gratitude and respect. Some of the notable directions was the white corn maiden, the yellow corn maiden, the blue corn maiden, and the red corn maiden. And where's my 6th color? There should be a 6th one. Was it green? Fuck. I'm going to say green. Each color corresponded to a direction, a clan identity, and a sacred balance. In Hopi ceremonies, the blue corn maiden in particular is remembered in myth. She was exiled by her people, taking abundance with her, which led to famine until rituals brought her back. The blue corn itself, or sakwako, and the term kalo, which means just corn, are terms that are deeply interwoven within ceremony and Hopi clan identity. The Hopi emphasize corn as a living relative rather than a single deity, which is why instead of just having a single corn deity or a single corn god, they had multiple deities, corn maidens and corn mothers. These were archetypal ancestors and spiritual beings rather than one goddess or figure. They were members of their family and their own ancestors.
Hi there. Did you know that humans are made mostly of water? Something like 80% or something? I don't remember the stats. But water's crucial, you guys. Water's crucial. Have you been drinking water today? I highly recommend. You can also add a little bit of like pink salt or Celtic salt or some nice like real salt to your water to help your electrolytes. You can do a cucumber infusion. You could add some mint in there, some chia seeds. Like I'm inviting you to be creative here, but I'm also here to remind you, drink your water, baby boy. Drink your water really helps with the function of the nervous system, the function of the bowels. We're talking optimal functioning here. Drink your water, baby.
I never want this episode to end. Can you tell? Well, we have a few more honorable mentions. Um, and really, I really wanted to talk about a goddess known as Mama Sara. This is a goddess from the Incan pantheon. She was also a goddess of corn, a goddess of maize. In the Incan language, Sara actually means maize, the sacred ears of corn worshipped in their temples. Mama Sara. Mama Sara literally means mother maize, mother corn. Oh, I said Incan language, but I think to be specific, the language I'm talking about is Quechua. Sorry, I want to clarify that. Quechua is language spoken of from the Incan empires. Okay. Not only is she the goddess of maize, she is the goddess of fertility, of sustenance, revered as the divine mother who nourishes all of her children. She is believed to live within the corn itself and present in every kernel and every ear of corn. Mama Sara sometimes would manifest in unusually shaped ears of corn, particularly those that sprouted 2 or 3 heads. Oh, how cool! Such maize was seen as her embodiment and kept as sacred relics. In some Quechua traditions, Mama Sara was once a woman transformed into maize to sustain humanity. Her sacrifice mirrored myths like Osiris in Egypt or Chicomecoitl in the Mexica world. And Duisri, how cute! Mama Sara is tied to the fertility of all women and to the fertility of the land. Just as a woman bears a child, maize bears kernels of corn, both seen as divine wombs of abundance. Uh, so, in their day-to-day rituals, people would keep ears of corn in temples and as shrines as living embodiments and offerings for Mama Sara. Also, there was a ritual known as a chicha ritual, where they would ferment corn into what they called chicha, which was basically a corn beer. They would drink chicha during ceremonies, not just as a festivity, but as a communion with the goddess Mama Sara herself. And during harvests, the first maize that was harvested was offered back to the earth and to the mountain spirits, known as the apus, in thanks for her great gift. Dude, like, this is how we need to be living. This is how we need to be living. We need to be revering the earth spirits and thanking them and giving our gifts back. This is beautiful. Another interesting fact is that Mama Sara is often invoked during funerals. They would place corn in the graves of the people who had passed to feed the dead, symbolizing continuity of life through the earth's nourishment and the rebirth of life even after death. Maize is and was the lifeblood of the Andes of Mesoamerica and North America. Entire empires were fed on corn, and it served as currency, as sustenance, and a ritual offering, a ceremonial fabric of reality. Mama Sara personifies the sanctity and the sacred nature of food. Agriculture wasn't just practical, agriculture was a spiritual relationship with the earth and the spirits. The Quechua people saw her as a part of their family. Interestingly, too, like even nowadays, all over Latin America, people use the term Pachamama. This means Mother Earth. Also a term Mamaquilla, Mamaquilla, which is Moon Mother, and Mama Sara, Mother of Maize. Each of these mothers cared for a dimension of life. Oh, how beautiful. In Andean villages to this day, maize is still honored in rituals. Specifically, shaped and carved cobs of corn are wrapped in cloth and kept in households as talismans of prosperity. The drink chicha, the fermented corn beer, continues to be brewed and shared during festivals and rites of passage, echoing its ancient role as Mama Sara's sacred drink. And farmers still use prayers before sowing and harvesting maize, recognizing the goddess's enduring presence. Ugh, how beautiful. I'm literally going to cry. And just think about it, like literally every ancient culture was cultivating grain. And think about all the things to this day that we are still being used. This concept of throwing rice at weddings as a fertility blessing. Like I grew up always wondering why, and no one could tell me why. And it's fertility blessing. Just the idea of burying your dead, but also blessing them to be resurrected. I grew up only hearing about this Jesus Christ myth, but it really comes from such an older belief, an ancient belief that all dead are resurrected through the soil, through the plants that are grown out of them. I could just, I could just cry. And I would like to say to you that you are my companion. You listening, if you made it this far, you are my companion. We break bread together. I may not be in the same place as you, but as my voice is echoing through your speakers, we're sharing space together. I have eaten food on many of my episodes, and I'm sure you've eaten food while listening. We have broken bread together, and that's what makes us company. It makes us comrades. We share bread and we break bread. I'm so honored to be a part of the human legacy. As disappointed as I am with this repetition of war and nameless violence, persecution and genocide, not just now, but throughout history, I still can say I am proud to be a human being. I'm so proud of our legacy of being connected with planet Earth, loving the plants, loving the soil, being so grateful for each harvest, grateful to be alive, and revering the consciousness in all things. That is an aspect of animism, of Shintoism, of the ancient world that I really think we need to get back to. This idea that all things are conscious. The rocks, the water, the earth, the plants, the animals, the air, everything has a consciousness. And I think if we were able to grasp that, I think we'd be able to fix a lot of our problems quickly. It's really not that hard. Life is easier when you work together. Life is easier when you work for the health of planet Earth. How interesting is it that as a human society, we have built ourselves as perpetuators and growers of grass. We grow grass to grow civilizations. I'm not necessarily against civilization, but my question now is what if we focused more on flowers and trees? What if we focused more on fruits and vegetables? What if these have a different kind of consciousness than grass? What if it was less about hoarding and having surpluses, more about sustainability of what we need. We can still grow grasses. I'm not against growing grasses. I love them. I'm just saying, what if a balance, not only of our diets, but how we're planting and terraforming the earth could actually change our consciousness as living beings? I always think about fairies being associated with flowers. Every fruit and vegetable has a flower. They're also so good for you. You know what I'm saying? Um, so anyway, those are just kind of my thoughts, tying back in this theory that modern colonization is essentially an out of balance grass consciousness, a grass consciousness that has infected the consciousness of humanity itself. I'm not saying grass is bad. I'm saying it's out of balance. That's all my theory is. Anyway, if you've made it this far, you're an OG. I love and appreciate you. This is a passion project of mine. It means so much to me to be able to do this. And my dream is to have more people write in. I would love to tell your stories. I would love to tell some scary stories you've had. Maybe you've seen ghosts. Maybe you've seen aliens. Maybe you would hear stories growing up from your mom or from your grandma. Maybe you grew up near a weird temple or near a weird church. Like, I'm anything you want. Tell me a scary story. Tell me a weird story. Tell me about a dream that you've had. I would love to just be reading people's dreams. That's kind of my dream. As my audience grows. I still feel like I'm kind of underdiscovered. I haven't really done a good job of putting myself out there. I've kind of been recording in silence and posting in silence. So if you've been listening to these episodes, you're really a real one because you found me while I'm still underground. But that's going to change. I'm really going to pour more love into myself. I believe in myself. I'm going to be posting my episodes out there. You're going to see more of Pepper Bell. I appreciate you so much. And I invite you in your day to day life to start paying attention to grasses and to grains. Pay attention when there's corn or millet or wheat in your food. Pay attention when you use the word ceremony or celebrate or company or companion. Think about the legacy of millions and millions and millions of humans that lived before us and their lives and beliefs and how it shaped the world that we live in, whether we recognize those individuals or not. We are living in the dream that they dreamed. They dreamt a dream that we are still living in. How trippy is that? Anyway, I love you so much. Over and out.